Okay, so we're going to get going with the training today. We are going to try to record this for some of your cross shift folks and just to see in the future if this might be a valuable tool. We do want to make this interactive, and we're specifically changing our training method so that we can have more interaction in a future session. So this is part one. We're going to just shoot for about an hour to an hour and 15, pretty short and to the point. We don't want to hit you with too much information. And then we're going to give you guys a couple weeks approximately to go ahead and work on doing the survey. In that time, we're going to provide you with all of our contact info. So you'll be able to certainly dialogue back and forth with questions that you may have or clarifications that you need. So by all means, in the next couple weeks, do that. But then in a couple weeks, we're going to do about a half hour to 45-minute follow up, just making sure that we get a lot of specific questions addressed. Different, cases bring up so many different scenarios in terms of what needs to be done. And so we're going to give you a couple weeks to go through those scenarios and then circle back and then look at, everything again, and then try to really even branch out a little bit further into some of the other housing types. Today, we're primarily going to focus on coordinated entry housing, but then we're going to bridge over into some of the other important types of housing that it's going to be helpful for you guys to know. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. It's Jessica says that she needs our permission to record, which I quite honestly, let's see here. This when I hit record on this end, it says it only asked me about me. So let's see. I don't know where the permissions are. I quite honestly have never given somebody else permission. I think we'd have to make you like a co-host or something like that, and I've
It
not
let
done that.
it's letting me record, Kevin. It says recording on my end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it says I have to ask the host permission, so that's okay as long as we can get the links after. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, and I've got a recording running too on another piece of software, so I think we've got it covered with a couple options here. So let's do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll start with the presentation. My name is Kevin Arthen. I'm the lead housing navigator here at the Coordinated Entry team in Albuquerque. Been here about 3 years, and I focus on the chronically homeless and vulnerable populations primarily, but I do learn all the other housing types. Do you want to go ahead and go, Jessica?
Yes, my name is Jessica. I am the training coordinator for Safe House. So I'm just making sure that everyone is getting the same information, and then I'll be working directly with the leadership team as well as anyone at the coalition to make sure that we are keeping everything according to whatever the newest updates are.
Annette, you want to go?
Hi, I'm Annette. I've been doing these assessments for a while, so it's nice. And I think I've talked to all of you guys, but it's nice to get some more clarification, get some questions answered, voice some of what we do and how we do these assessments to help our residents. So I am excited to talk to you guys and see how we can better help everybody here and get you guys on the same page.
Sounds good. And then Allison, you want to go next?
Hello, I'm Allison. I'm fairly new here at Safe House, so I'm looking forward just to be able to learn everything and then, be able to further help our residents here.
Thank you. And then RA, I'm not sure who that is.
She doesn't have any audio, but she is typing. That is Jackie.
Okay. All right. And then we have a couple others. If you guys want to, I'm not sure who's showing up as guest. Go ahead.
Me, Darlene. I work for housing. And I'm just looking forward to getting a refresher on how to complete these assessments.
Good. And then we have one last person, I'm not sure, somebody calling in.
I think it's Antoinette.
Yes, sorry, me. Yes, Antoinette. I'm just looking forward to a refresher.
Great, sounds good. And then I think everybody but Antoinette can see my screen if I share it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, it won't
Okay.
let me. No, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and we'll get going with the presentation. Okay, is that coming through okay? You guys see that? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to take just kind of a focused look at what we do to screen through the coordinated assessment system, and then screen out if somebody's not appropriate. We are actually, you guys are the brand new experimental group with kind of a new system and a new tool that we're using. So we're excited to share this with you. You guys will probably maybe even give us some feedback, hopefully, if it's needing to be have any refinement, or we need to consider anything else in it. So we appreciate you guys partnering with us in developing that. So I'm going to get going. So first of all, just a quick recap on what, oh, it looks like something went on its own. Huh. Hopefully, we'll stay there. Okay. So just going to do a quick recap on what coordinated entry is, just for those of you that may not be familiar or need some clarification. So coordinated entry is a required system for HUD-funded monies that are serving a couple categories of homeless services, the COC, Continuum of Care, and the ESG, Emergency Solutions Grants funding streams. So HUD back in 2009 kind of sanctioned it, and then 2017 made it a requirement that if you're going to offer housing and you got grants for that type of housing, you're going to have to use the coordinated entry system. So the coordinated entry system is a very coordinated, as the name says, way of bringing somebody into the system from a dispersed model where many people in the community can do a single survey tool and then bring it into a centralized location and in a central database and evaluate for the possible housing types that could occur in that particular region. Our region is called the Albuquerque Continuum of Care. Continuums of care are where there are a group of providers that offer some kind of service, whether it's housing, shelter, or some other kind of service that is serving the homeless population. And they call it the continuum because they're hoping that there will be an array of service providers that can offer services. So in our continuum, there's about $6 million that come in, not only just for these housing types, but for other services. So when a survey comes into our system, the database that tracks it is tracking like all those different continuum of services. Ours specifically is called coordinated entry, and it goes into the same database and then eventually ends up hopefully getting referred to a housing project or getting diverted to something more appropriate, which we'll talk about more later. Okay, I'm going to go through a quick life cycle of exactly how this works, just kind of step by step, so you guys can kind of see it from beginning to end. So you guys, a lot of your staff have done the VI-SPDAT housing surveys, and so in the past, I think we kind of just did a lot of housing surveys, just kind of for anybody that looked like they were close to the definition of homelessness. And now we're kind of making sure that the process has a little bit higher standard of making sure that we're meeting all the HUD regulations. And so the first step now is that we're screening for eligibility, which should have been happening some before, but now we're going to be a little bit more strict about that. So somebody screens the person in front of them for eligibility, and then if they're appropriate for coordinated entry, then they're going to move ahead with doing a survey. They're going to check to make sure that the person is actually eligible for one of the 4 housing types. And then once the survey is completed, it's going to be sent into our system, entered into the HMIS, the Homeless Management Information Service database, which is secure and it's required by HUD. And then it gets put into that system under a specific category called the coordinated entry program entry, which is the one that specifically tracks housing in the Albuquerque continuum of care. And then if the survey, it happens to be one that's prioritized at one of the top of the 4 housing lists, and there is an opening, then one of our navigators is going to take a look at their situation and then really examine whether or not they are going to meet all of the requirements for rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, or transitional housing. So in our system, everyone that gets evaluated has to be currently literally homeless, which means that they're on the streets, they're in a shelter, they're in a motel voucher at night, or in some place not meant for habitation. Some of them are going to need to be verified as having a disability by a licensed provider. Some of them are going to need homeless verification. And so we're going to have to gather that from third-party sources, and there's strict standards about how we do that. So once we have done all the verification, then we begin to go through the rest of the process of verifying their eligibility, making sure that they are truly meeting all the requirements for any one of those 4 housing types. Usually we try to do this documentation ahead of openings so that we're ready when we do get openings for housing, we can just send them in. Then once we do get an opening for permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, or rapid rehousing, we take the person at the top of the list and we refer them. And at that point, we actually do an application and send it over to whatever respective project has the opening for rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, or Casa de Phoenix, the transitional housing group. So then once that housing project has accepted the referral, they determine if the documentation meets HUD regulations. If they do meet the requirements, they issue them a housing voucher. In the case of on-site projects like shared permanent supportive housing, they're just granted a spot, in a unit at one of those locations in the 2 group homes with TLS, or they're granted a room at Casa de Phoenix at one of their locations. But if they get a voucher, like the rapid rehousing vouchers or the permanent supportive housing vouchers, they have to find a property manager and an apartment complex that will accept their voucher, and that unit has to pass inspection. So that's kind of the life cycle for the people that do end up getting a voucher or a unit as a result of going through coordinated entry. But there's going to be some that don't, and this is a new process that we're actually just implementing today that will help you determine if they are eligible or not eligible for the 4 housing types. And so we've built this screening tool. I sent it over to Jessica earlier today, and she should be sending it all out to you guys so you can begin to use this. I'm going to switch over to it, the actual live screening tool. It lives online. It doesn't have any, identifying information or anything like that. It's just a guide that helps you kind of go through and see if somebody really meets all the requirements for any one of our 4 housing types. So I'm gonna kind of stop with this presentation real quick and jump over to that. So this is the screening tool, and I'm going to go through this and maybe we'll go through it a few different times. So the idea with this is that it's going to tell you with indicators as we go through whether or not red being no and green being yes, you're actually meeting the requirements or not meeting the requirements with the individual in front of you for one of our housing types. So let's just go through the first question, and we've tried to craft these questions so that they're clear, are intended to make you able to, ascertain whether or not somebody's specifically meeting a specific requirement that are one of the sub-requirements for these four. So the first one says, what has been your nighttime residence the majority of the time the last 7 to 14 days? And there's 4 choices here. So the first one is literally homeless. So that's streets, shelter, motel voucher, vehicle, or uninhabitable place. And so it'll turn up green if that's the case for them, and you've got that's eligible status. But it's going to turn up red if they were staying in a motel that they paid for, they're doubling up with somebody, or they're in transitional housing. If they're fleeing domestic violence, which is obviously relevant to you all, that turns up green because that is an eligible status. But they have to have left where they were being abused. They can't be staying in that home, staying there in in a home where they're still with their abuser, because they're obviously not fleeing at that point. And then I know this becomes a question sometimes. Sometimes people anticipate somebody wanting to come into the system. They're living in a home, but they're near eviction. And some people have felt tempted to do a survey, but that's actually not an eligible status. They actually have to be currently and for at least 7 days in streets, shelter, or motel voucher. So that's really there's only those 2 eligible statuses there. So we'll just say that they came to your shelter and they were, or they were, well, yeah, we'll say that they came to your shelter. We'll just check number 1. And then the next question has to do with chronicity. It's just an estimate of how long they've been experiencing homelessness. So question is, what is a close estimate of the total number of months literally homeless, only in a motel voucher, vehicle, outdoors tent, or shelter in the last 36 months? So getting a close estimate, and you're saying, are they 12 months or more, or less than 12 months literally homeless? Let's just say in this case that the person is 12 months or more. And you'll notice over here, it's not showing that they're chronically homeless yet, and I'll show you why in just a second. So the next question is, have you completed or updated a VI-SPDAT housing survey anytime in or anywhere in the last 12 months? And a note that they can update every 12 months if they had gone longer than that. So let's say that they had updated. Now, if they hadn't, and it had been longer than 12 months, or they'd never done one, then then you would need to you'd want to fill one out perhaps as soon as we get to the end. Number 4 has to do with status. We can serve families and individuals with different housing types, but it just depends. So in this question we asked, do you have children under 18 with current legal custody more than 50% of the time, and children can move into housing with you right now? So all of those conditions have to be met, not just one of them. Every single one of them has to be met. Under 18, legal custody more than 50% of the time, and children can move in with them, if they're to be housed. So let's say that we're going to say yes. This is a family that meets all those conditions. The next question, are you capable of steady full-time work or livable income, and usually have a recent history of steady full-time work that can be relied upon to pay for housing? Let's say in this case that the family does not have the ability to work full-time and rely on that for housing. And then the next question has to do with disability. And so it says, according to a licensed medical or mental health provider, do you have or think you might have a verifiable long-term disability, could be mental, physical, or an addiction, that interferes with daily life and often prevents full-time employment? Not always, but it can often prevent. So let's say that they do actually have a disability. And you'll notice here, it'll just make a distinction between a dual diagnosis, where they have a mental and addiction diagnosis disability, compared to any other type of disability. And the only reason why we're doing that is that Casa de Phoenix, our transitional housing project, requires that they have to have a dual diagnosis if they happen to be going there. So you know what? Let's switch over. We'll just say that they do have a dual diagnosis. Okay, and then the next question: are you okay with at least one form of shared living, where you're sharing any kind of variation of a bedroom, a bathroom, or a kitchen? And we'll just say that they're not comfortable with that. And then, has the person or their support worker determined if they're prioritized for permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, or transitional housing? Let's say that we really don't know. They had done a survey, let's say, but we don't know if they're prioritized or not. Number 9, if the individual or family has been verified as meeting homeless, disability, and all other requirements. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I mistakenly I wrote this wrong. Has the I think it's supposed to say, has the individual or family been verified as meeting these requirements? And we'll say they're not verified. And I think that actually I see that there's some problems here. This was actually supposed to mean I think it still says prioritize down here at the bottom. Sorry for the speed. We'll fix that. But it's actually supposed to say, are they meeting the eligibility requirements? We'll get that fixed. I'll just say. Apologies for that. Okay, so and I'll fix this when I come back later. Okay, so the idea with this one is that they're actually meeting the eligibility requirements. So that's really only somebody that's been prioritized. And then finally, the last question is, in the surveyor's judgment, is this person capable of living independently? Can they remember to pay rent, and utilities? Can they cook? Can they clean? Can they manage a household with some help? Or would it be very difficult for them to manage this on their own? And so basically, in our housing types, if somebody can't live independently, and just to clarify, like if they can live independently with a case manager support, like that's different. But if they, even with a case manager support, can't live independently, we want to say no. But here we'll say yes. So this particular individual, now that we go back over to the chart on the right, isn't quite meeting the requirements yet for anything. But it looks like some of them are possibilities. Like permanent supportive housing, they're actually meeting everything there. We just don't know if they're prioritized or verified because we haven't checked. Maybe we're submitting a new survey. So that one would be fine. We could do, we could submit a survey because they actually are, a candidate for permanent supportive housing. Shared permanent supportive housing, they said they weren't interested in, a shared living environment. So, that's not really an option. And rapid rehousing's not an option because they can't work full time. That one is in the red, so it's indicating that they wouldn't meet that requirement. And if they were going to go to Casa de Phoenix, the transitional housing program, they would have to be an individual, but they're a family. So I'm just going to stop there with one example and just kind of see if there's any questions. You kind of get the general idea of how this is working.
If there's red in any of the 4 rows, then that means that they don't qualify for it, correct?
No. So if there's red only in prioritized and verified, but there's green in the entire rest of it, then it's a possibility. So when in our system, when somebody goes in, um, you don't know if they're prioritized or not. What this means is that the red is telling you that you should check and see if they are prioritized. So let's say that this particular individual, you guys had submitted the survey because it looked like they could do permanent supportive housing because they met all the other requirements. We just didn't know if they were prioritized or verified, and you found out that they are prioritized. So then it turns green. Okay. So that red is just telling you for prioritized, it's just telling you you need to check, or they need to check and see if they really are prioritized or not. Because if they're not, then it's not going to be an option. And then if they're prioritized, then the last step is that they need to check and see if they actually can be verified. They have to meet homeless verification, or they have to meet disability verification. And if they met that, then they're completely prioritized for permanent supportive housing. Now, for some reason, I'll have to check the coding on this, but it's not turning green, and that we copied this earlier, and so maybe it's a problem with it being copied. I'll make a few touch-ups on that. Like I said, you guys are the very first organization to use this. So that's a great question. If they have prioritized and verified are red, it does not mean that you can't do it. It just means that if everything but prioritized and verified are red, then you can do it. So again, this one, permanent supportive housing, is good. Not if it's red at the top, definitely don't do it. But in this one, definitely you can't do rapid rehousing because this can work as turned red. So is that clear?
Mhm.
Okay, great question. Good question. So so the basic idea that we want to instill is that, like I said, unless prioritized and verified, if they're red, that's fine. But if you have anything else that's red, and these top ones should turn red or green for you, and I'll make sure that gets fixed. But if they are none of them are possibilities, then you shouldn't do the VI-SPDAT. And so I think that's one of the things that we've been seeing is that some people were doing VI-SPDATs when they didn't actually meet the requirements. And you know what I think I'll do is I'll make it so that if enough information, enough requirements are met for them to move ahead, like for this one, for permanent supportive housing, since they're meeting all the 4 main requirements, I'll probably just have it turn green for you. And then, but it'll tell you that they still need to be prioritized and verified. So I'll make it indicate green when it's okay to move forward with doing a survey. Any other questions on the pre-screening tool? Okay, so we're going to be requiring you guys to go through this. Basically, it's gonna kind of serve a dual purpose because it's going to allow you to kind of answer some of the questions ahead of time on the VI-SPDAT, but also help you determine if the person is or isn't a good fit for one of these housing types. Okay? All right, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay, so once we've oh, go ahead. Was there somebody trying to ask a question? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. So the next step would be that if one of those 4 housing types turns green, then you're going to go ahead and fill out an appropriate, survey, whether it's family, individual, or youth. If they're not eligible, then you're going to use like something like the Albuquerque Coordinated Resource Guide. It's got a lot of other types of housing, and especially relevant right now is like Bernalillo County Section 8, Community Connections, HUD subsidized housing, which is the 202, 811, or multifamily 30%, or the HUD tax credit. A commonly misunderstood qualification criteria is that HUD 202, 811, or multifamily have to have income, and they actually don't. They're going to try to get $50 a month out of the person, but they can be zero income qualified. So those are all viable options. And then community connections can also. I think if somebody
I'm gonna
somebody
text
just
Christy and be like, Jackie and Alex are the next.
so somebody if I don't know if that's you, Annette, if you could mute, that'd be great.
Sorry, I got disconnected. I'm back.
Okay, so if they have if it's been determined that they really do need to do a survey, then go ahead. If not, you're diverting right then and there, and you're working on some other type of housing. And this, especially at this step, this is something that is going to be a little bit different, and we're actually going to be a little bit stricter if somebody really doesn't qualify for coordinated entry. You may get your survey sent back if you haven't used the pre-screening tool, because we're going to be requiring it. The whole intent is we want people that are coming into our system to make sure that they're getting connected right away, not just sort of. I see somebody else is coming back in. So we want to make sure that people are getting connected right away, not going down a road where they really don't have any option at the end of it. So that's the intent behind this. So the next step is to make sure that you're using best practices and quality control as you're going through the survey. I'm going to just show you real quick what I'm talking about, because this is back on the screening tool. So step 3, we're going to make sure that we're using best practices. So this quality control checklist is right here. So this is something you can certainly get familiar with, and you're going to want to basically memorize this. But it's also going to be a good recap. When you get done with your survey, you should be able to say yes to all of these. So did you use this pre-screen tool? Yes. If the pre-screen tool said that they need to use another housing type, we're going to go a different way with them other than coordinated entry. The next thing we're going to do, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, is we're going to make sure that you use the right survey. Is it a family or an individual survey? Do we know how to do the different, do the one or the other? We're going to teach you in a minute, but make sure you use the right one. Are we going to survey them in a setting where somebody else could be within earshot? Or are we going to make sure that they're in a safe place? You guys are pretty dialed into trauma informed, so you guys probably do a good job of this, but let's make sure that they have a good, safe place to do the survey in. The next one is that we want to make sure, as we're going through the survey, which I'll show you in a minute, that the people understand the survey questions. So we're really going to dial into them, give them examples and clarifications if they need it, so that we have good quality information gathered. And we're going to make sure that everybody knows, because this is a very commonly misunderstood part of coordinated entry. We're going to make sure that every person that does the survey knows that they are not on a wait list. They're not going to be moving up some kind of wait list. And unfortunately, we can't guarantee housing, so we want to make sure and communicate that to them right away. We're telling them that this is not an application. The only time an application gets submitted is like we said earlier, at the very end of our process, once we've determined that they are verified for housing. We're going to use durable contact information, which I'm going to show you exactly where later on. Durable contact information. I have a little bit of a delay here. Durable contact information, which you can get into the formal definition, we'll do maybe a little bit more later, is information that will endure as somebody is moving up a wait list. Now, since ours isn't a wait list, things like Bernalillo County Section 8 is a wait list, or HUD 30% subsidized is a wait list. But if we gather contact information and it's their cell phone number and it's going to go away once they lose it, then that's not durable. So this durable contact information is a best practice that gives you a strategy for making sure that if they're going up, community connections wait list, for example, and it's going to be a 10-month wait, the contact information is going to endure. And the reason why we're making a big emphasis on that is that one of the biggest problems for housing right now is that, for example, community connections, a very small percentage of the people that are on those wait lists end up getting housing. With community connections, I think the last time they polled 50 people, they got a hold of about 3 or 4. So kind of a big deal. And with our system too, we have had so many people, we don't have good durable contact information with them, and it's not even the contact information gathered is not even lasting a couple of weeks or a month. So what you want to do is you want to find other sources of contact that are friends, family, case managers, anybody in the community or anybody in their extended social network that can be relied upon to gather contact information for that. So this has been a major problem. It's kept a whole bunch of people from being housed, and it's something we didn't really think about as much at first, but we know it's kind of a big deal. So definitely do a great job on that. You're going to give the person the best ways to contact us, which is actually text and email. They can certainly call, but text and email are the best ways to come in. I'm going to give you that at the end. And then what we'd like you to do now that you have this screening tool, once you use the screening tool and it indicates in green, that you're submitting for a specific type of housing, you're going to write at the top of your survey that you're submitting it because it indicated that rapid rehousing, for example, maybe was an option, or permanent supportive housing was an option, or shared permanent supportive housing, or CDP, which is Casa de Phoenix. That's the transitional housing program. So you're going to write those at the top of the survey so that we know you've done the pre-screening and that you've identified that this really is one of those 4 types is an option. But if it's not, and say, for example, another agency within the city is getting like city rapid rehousing, and they're required to use the VI-SPDAT, then you can put city rapid rehousing at the top of it, and we'll know that the only reason why you're using this is because they're meeting the requirements for the city rapid rehousing, maybe at Barrett House or some other agency, and then you're submitting it because of that. And finally, we're actually tracking any kind of housing referral in coordinated entry because we need a good centralized place to track housing outcomes. So you can also put tracking at the top of your VI-SPDAT, like if you're tracking HUD 30% subsidized or you're tracking community connections, that way we can store their contact information in here, we can track the outcome, we can follow up with them. So just write one of those things at the top of your survey so that we know the reason why you're submitting this. Again, rapid rehousing, RRH, PSH, permanent supportive housing, shared PSH, CDP is Casa de Phoenix. That also helps us know right away that they're interested in Casa de Phoenix, and we can follow up with them immediately. Or like city rapid rehousing or tracking HUD 30% or tracking community connections. So make sure and put that at the top of the survey. And then just finally, just double check everything and submit the survey right away so that this person is not just laying in limbo. If they're going to be possibly on a prioritized list, we want to make sure and find out right away. Okay? Any questions on the quality control checklist? Okay. All right. So step 3, we've done the quality control checklist. And we've marked the survey, because we're doing, right at the beginning, we know the reason why we're doing this: rapid rehousing, city rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, shared permanent supportive housing, CDP, Casa de Phoenix, or we're tracking another housing type. Once we get the survey completed, you're going to submit it to Anna, unless somebody else takes over that role, and she's going to score it. She's going to record all their personal contact information. She's going to assign them a cross-reference number, or actually, I don't know. Do you guys, somebody that's been doing this a while, feel free to speak up. Do you guys assign the cross-reference number, and then Anna just records it. Is that how it works? Hello, Jessica.
Sorry. I was trying to talk and I realized I was on mute. So we do have, it's like already pre-written on our forms, the
Okay.
cross-reference number. And I don't know who puts that. I just assumed it was always you.
Oh yeah, no, I'm guessing Anna probably manages that locally, and when she gives you guys your VI-SPDATs, it's got that reference 01, 100, and three more numbers. Like right now, we might be in the 300 or 400s, so it would be like 346 at the end of that or whatever. So you're making sure that they have that cross-reference. That way, if we see them on our list, we're not going to know who they are at all, but we can call Anna and say, you know, cross-reference number, 01100 342 is, up for in prioritized for whatever of those four housing types.
Yes. So we have it all, and we even have like a binder where we log everybody that's completed one with their number and the date that they completed it.
So, and this will be where especially that durable contact information is going to be so important, because we want to give her a robust set of ways to contact this person. Obviously, people are in and out of a shelter a lot, so really interviewing them and making sure that you come up with some good contacts for them is going to serve them really well. It'll make the difference between them getting housed or not a lot of times.
Yeah, we have a separate form for that as well. That's contact information, including an alternate contact.
Okay. Yeah, and you'll see as I get into the durable contact information, we even recommend about 4 or 5 contacts. So if you guys may consider just giving yourself plenty of extra space on your contact sheet. Okay. So the fifth step is that we want to make sure that you're following up, or the person's following up right away, because like we said, if they're not prioritized, they may not end up getting any kind of housing in our system. So they should be following up right away and see if they're prioritized. And if they are prioritized, are they getting verified to see, if they're actually going to able to make the requirements. If they are not able to be prioritized, or they're not able to be verified, then we want to act on another type of housing right away. And this is, again, a kind of another key point in the system where we've had big gaps. We've had people not follow up to find out if they're prioritized and verified. So we want you guys to message to them like, okay, you got in the system, but nothing's going to happen unless you're prioritized and verified. And if those two things can't happen, don't worry about it. Let's just focus on another type of housing. Something that I'm going to recommend to you guys is that I would shoot for within the first couple weeks, finding out if they're prioritized and verified, and if they're not, start getting some kind of application submitted. Find out something that they can meet the qualifications for and get it submitted. Okay, something that is going to be coming up is a new quality control process. We're basically going to be evaluating the surveys as they come in, and we'll give you some feedback on them. There'll be like a receipt slip that comes back to you, and if there's problems on a continued basis, we'll try to follow up with you and make sure that everything's improved. But if it's not improved, and we really don't want to go there, we would actually ask you to stop surveying if you didn't make adjustments to your survey, or issues, whatever was going on. Okay. And like I said before, we really, the goal here is we want quality surveys and we want housing outcomes. We don't want to just get a survey submitted, and so that's kind of the change of where coordinated entry is heading. We're trying to really increase the number of people that are connected to housing. Okay, so let's move on and get into the survey. I'm gonna switch over. Okay, this is what your guys' survey looks like. I'll blow it up just a little bit. So feel free to take a few notes if you'd like. I'm just going to hit high points on this. We've actually hit some important high points already. with the pre-screen tool. So there'll be a lot that we've kind of already covered, but I'm going to give you a few high points. So as you do this, as you sit down with the person, remember, don't always just assume that they're going to be an individual. A lot of people that might be sitting in front of you might have kids that are minor children that are staying somewhere else for like a zillion different reasons, and I'm sure you guys are somewhat familiar with this. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure that they're either going to be an individual or a family. And I'll tell you a little bit about youth in a second. So if they're an individual, no kids under 18, or if they do have kids under 18 and they're not in their custody, you'd do an individual. Or if the kids weren't going to be moving in with them, you would do an individual. So make sure and ask all those questions. Do you have legal custody? Do you going to have them more than 50% of the time? Are the kids actually going to be able to move in with you? You have to ask that every time. These should be your very first questions so that you know if you're going to go family route or you're going to go individual route. So in this case, let's say that we're going individual. You guys have an introduction that's, giving them a sense that they are protected by VAWA, and we're definitely going to protect their, personal information by using this survey. And they have, they certainly have a right to have all their information protected. So you're going to put in all their information, make sure it was nice and neat. Can't tell you how many times we've had just incomplete information in there. So make sure and put all that in there. Obviously, you're going to make sure that they know it's not going to be stored in our database. It's only going to be stored in your secure location at the shelter. So make sure that that's absolutely clear, that they know nothing's going to go in the database. Now, at this point, it is really important to check if they do already have a survey in the system. You do not want to go the anonymous route again. You actually want to find out if they already are in our system and they've already consented to share. We can reverse it if they really don't want to share their information. But if they've already consented to share all of their information and they're already in our system, you don't have to go down the route of like assigning another cross-reference number. They are kind of already set up. And so again, just ask them like, okay, if you've checked in and you find out that they are in our system, just make sure and you want to follow their consent. If they really want it, if they feel really strongly they need to get it de-identified, we can work with that with them. It's quite a process. So just make sure that they really need it. You look like you had a question, Jessica.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I have run into a situation several times where there was an assessment done, but it was done with an abuser as a family. At that point, how would we go about that? Would we do a new one, or?
So the survey was done with an abuser, and the question is, should you do another one? So I think that, if your judgment is that the questions were altered because the person couldn't escape their abuser, and they reported very differently, definitely reach out to us. Ultimately, it's up to our director to authorize someone that needs a survey done within, when it's under a year, because you're only allowed to update them once a year. But if that was the case, just explain. I would imagine, Alex is probably going to, err on the side of making sure that we have good information and that we're representing the person well. So great question. You've determined family or individual. You've determined whether or not they already have a survey and whether or not they really need to be anonymous again. And then you're just going through and making sure that there's just a little bit of, shared information here about what's going on. So again, no personal identifying information is going to be shared. But if they do want to share information with a case manager, this one's really important that they know that we can share housing information with somebody that they designate, and that'll happen later on. And just let them know that they're participating in a system that doesn't guarantee housing, like we said. We're going to look and see if this is, the best option for them. We've already done the pre-screening tool, so we tell them like, hey, it looked like you might qualify for one of these four. So we've kind of answered that to some degree. And then you're letting them know, like, there's going to be, maybe some additional verification that's needed in order for you to really, know if you're eligible, and some prioritization. And then you can let them know that this survey lasts a couple of years, but you can update every year. And then you just go ahead and have them print and sign, and then move on into the survey. At this point, I think it's really important to make sure that you do a good quality introduction to the survey. You want to make sure, again, that you've put them in a comfortable room where nobody else is going to be, hearing them. Obviously, your folks have gone through a lot of extra trauma, and they absolutely deserve to be in a safe space, and nobody should be in earshot. I always check in with them to make sure and let them know, um, have them direct me as to what a comfortable environment is for them to do this survey in. So make sure that they're comfortable before you do anything. And then once you've ensured that they're safe, then you're going to go in and you're going to kind of describe what's going on, what's going to happen with the survey. So this is just an example introduction. It says, I'll be honest, some questions are personal in nature. If you feel uncomfortable or upset during the interview, you may ask to take a break, skip any of the questions, or stop the survey. Nobody's going to get upset or angry if you decide to. Or if you don't understand a question, let me know and I'll be happy to clarify it. There's no right or wrong answers, and there's nothing that's going to prevent you from receiving services. So just answer honestly. So that's kind of the canned response, but it's got certain elements. You can certainly say it in your own words, but letting them know, like, hey, there's going to be some personal questions that are coming your way. Letting them know that it's really important that they know we're not trying to use wrong answers against them. We would just want honest answers. And I really emphasize that. I also emphasize that, like, none of this information is going to get shared with anybody else except for the housing providers in the system, and especially if they're an anonymous, like, obviously no personal information is connected to this. So make sure that they understand that this is safe. Here's somebody that's had a whole bunch of their rights violated, so you have to make sure that if they have any questions about this, what's happening here, what information they're giving, what's going to happen, what do they have a right to not say or say, like, just especially with your people, just take it slow, make sure that they're comfortable. There's a lot of brain science that, speaks to, like, somebody being, their brain being kind of comfortable before they can actually, sort of have a quality interaction and convey things in an accurate way. So definitely, make sure and put them at ease. And then once you do, you've already determined with the pre-screen tool that they're going to meet a condition where you're going to indicate where they're sleeping the most often. So shelter, don't use safe haven. That's not something that we even have in New Mexico. You shouldn't be using transitional housing because you already pre-screened for that. So you're just going to say shelters most of the time. If they were, like, most of the time outdoors before they came into your shelter, you could use outdoors. Other is only for things that are places not meant for habitation. Like if they've been sleeping in a car most of the time, or in a shed or something, you could use other, but don't use it for anything else. Don't use it for friends or family. If they've been staying with friends or family the most of the time, your pre-screen should have said that you shouldn't be doing this, because, and a lot of times it might be worth waiting, a week to see if they're even going to stay in the shelter. It's your judgment, but if they're not going to be meeting a literal homeless definition, the pre-screen should have told you, this isn't a good idea. So you should only have a literal homeless answer in this first question. Then you're going to move on. I'm not going to go through every question here, but a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to kind of go through the ones that might need some clarification. How long has it been since you lived in permanent supportive housing? You are kind of already answered that in the pre-screen, so you're going to be able to record that pretty quickly. In the last 3 years, how many times have you been homeless? Just do a quick estimate. We always get into this a lot more detail later on if they're prioritized. Number 4, it's just asking how many times something happened. So this one, slow down, definitely slow down. Like, you want to capture anytime anybody had an instance of any of these next 6 questions. And again, don't put yes or no. Some people put yes or no in response to these. Put a number. We're working off the data, working off of 0 to 10, and then it's greater than 10 if in our system. So you're going to put the number there. With the next ones, definitely slow down. One thing that I always do when I'm doing a survey is I don't like stare them down, but I kind of check in on their eyes to make sure that they're actually dialed in, to the conversation. Like if you ask one of these questions and there's this kind of this glazed look, like you might want to, sort of like ask them, if they had any questions, or you might rephrase the question. So the format is that you're supposed to read every question verbatim first. Then you can clarify it if they have any questions. So I'll do an example here. Like a good question that often kind of gets misunderstood is number 9. So here's how I would read number 9. Number 9, I would say, do you ever do things that may be considered to be risky, like exchange sex for money, run drugs for someone, have unprotected sex with somebody you don't know, share a needle, or anything like that? And sometimes I usually give a few more examples. I say, do you ever go seek out risky people, or do you go seek out risky places? Do you do anything risky like any of those things that I just mentioned? And so you're making sure that they get the idea that it's not about these specific instances, it's about things that are like this. Okay, so always slow down, always make sure if they need it, give a couple examples so that you're getting a good quality answer. Just going to go through and hit a few high points on questions that are often a little bit trickier. So this question number 10 is there any person, past landlord, business, bookie, dealer, or government group like the IRS that thinks that you owe them money? And so the answer to this one should be yes, a high percentage of the time. Like if we thought about us as just workers, we would probably answer yes, because just about all of us owe somebody some money somewhere. So that one's a commonly should be represented well as yes. Let's see. I'm going to go through a few trickier questions. Like 17. This one is kind of a poorly worded question. It says, if there was a space available in a program that specifically assists people that live with HIV or AIDS, would that be of interest to you? And for this one, they're not asking if they would tolerate living in a place where people have HIV or AIDS. They're just asking if they have HIV or AIDS. So you can read the question verbatim, but if they sound like they're answering that, like they want to get into housing and this might be an option, you can just say, do you have HIV or AIDS? Because really the answer is yes or no according to that. Okay. There's a repeated question in here 3 times, and it basically has to do with, did you have to leave housing because of a physical health? Oh, did you have a question, Jessica?
I think you are already talking about leaving the housing because of the physical health. I did have a question about that. So since we help victims of domestic violence and they're fleeing the abuse, does that count as a yes?
So what it's trying to say is that because you have a physical disability, did that disability end up being a reason why you had to leave somewhere? So was there a specific example of somebody that had a physical disability? It's not due to them being abused. It's the original qualifying condition is that they actually have a physical disability. Then because of that, it created some kind of complication or problem. Then they had to leave. That's what it's getting at. Does that clarify?
Yes, I was like, because I know on question number 15, that's always something I wasn't 100% sure about.
Yeah, for sure. So one that does this repeated ask about whether or not one of these underlying issues ended up causing them to have to leave housing is 21. This one, sometimes I even repeat that, same assurance, like we're not going to use any of this against you. We just want an honest answer. So With 21, has your drinking or drug use led you to being kicked out of an apartment or program where you were staying in the past? And so a lot of times I'll say, did you ever have, just as a clarification, a time when you were drinking or using drugs? One thing led to the next. There was conflict, there was tension, and then because of that, you had to leave the shelter. You had to leave the place you were staying. So just kind of help them make that connection. A lot of people don't necessarily make the connection between the drinking or drug use and then them having to leave, because there might have been several events, of things that happened in between, and then they eventually had to leave. So 21 is one of those. 23 is another. Basically, it's, did they have to leave somewhere because of a mental health or brain issue? The way I approach that one is I actually first ask them, do you have any mental health or brain issues or developmental disability issues? Did you have to take special ed in school? Make it really broad. A lot of people do identify with some of those. So then if they do identify, then I usually say something like, okay, you know how that affects you. Have you ever had trouble maintaining your housing? Been kicked out of an apartment or shelter or someplace you were staying because of that? So then they're able to kind of connect their experience of the mental health or brain issue to one thing leading to the next, and them having to leave housing because of it. So definitely slow down, help them make the connection between what may have happened because of their brain injury or their mental health issue or their developmental disability leading up to them having to leave somewhere. So it's good to make sure and capture that. Don't be in a big hurry on this. In general, remember, you're capturing somebody's life experiences, so this is a big deal. We want to represent people well. We're kind of almost like their attorney anyway. We want to bring forward all the facts that are going on in their life. So if you rush through this, you're not going to represent their life well. So definitely slow down. This is a big responsibility to represent them well. So the rest of it are pretty straightforward. I would say 27 is a little bit funky because it tries to kind of cram so much into one question. It's basically asking, like, did they have some kind of abuse or trauma that caused their current homelessness, is the intent of the question. So because it's asking so much at once about abuse and trauma, and especially your folks are going to have experienced a lot of this, again, slow down. Sometimes you might want to say, like, I've had people that don't understand the word trauma, so sometimes you may want to explain what the word trauma means. Sometimes you might want to say, has your current period of homelessness been caused by an experience of abuse or trauma? Was it emotional? Was it physical? And you could slowly allow them to respond to each one of those, so that you're making sure that they can sort of absorb the question, because it's a lot of different domains of where possible abuse or trauma could have happened. So we want to, again, capture it and make sure it's accurate. Okay. I would just say real quick, kind of ignore these score recommendations. Those are very general guidelines. Actually, this survey, the individual survey goes up to 17, the family survey goes up to 23, and we really, when we're doing permanent supportive housing, we start at the very top of the list. When we're starting with family permanent supportive housing, we start at like 13. When we're starting with rapid rehousing, when we're starting with permanent supportive housing, we go to the very top of the list too. When we go to family rapid rehousing, we start at 13. And when we start with Casa de Phoenix, we start at 10. But please don't discuss scores with people. That really confuses them, because like the pre-screen tool showed you, actually getting screened is a lot of interdependency between saying yes to a whole bunch of different questions. So let the pre-screen tool kind of give them a general idea, but make sure that they know that, like, nothing's being guaranteed until they're prioritized and verified. Okay.
Actually, our staff, we are told not to do any of that scoring, and we leave it all to Anna.
Yep. Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, Anna actually has typically done all that, just so that, she's used to doing it all, and so that's a good process. Something that I emailed it over, Jessica's got it. When you do the family survey, which I'm just going to touch on in a quick second, it's going to have all this additional demographic information. Now we're requiring it for all children. So make sure Not only for the individuals, but for the families. You're doing all the extra information for every minor in the household. So with that said, any questions on the individual survey before I switch to the family? Nope. Okay. All right. So kind of backing up to the beginning, let's say you did verify kids in custody majority of the time, kids are under 18, kids are going to move in with them. All three of those conditions are met. So you're off doing the family survey instead. So basically everything is the same, except that you're going to be providing extra details about the kids, if they're currently living with them or they're going to be joining them. You should definitely, if no kids are going to be joining them, definitely shouldn't be using this. So make sure of that. One thing that's really important, an important mistake that happens is that you may only have one household member in front of you, but that household member is answering for the entire family. So make sure that some people just don't, they only think about their own experience. What a family should be, that whichever adult you're talking to, they should be representing the experience of every family member. So these questions are worded toward the entire family. So make sure that you're getting that collective experience gathered here. This is very different than the individual survey. You have to be able to gather anything. If any one person in the family says yes to any of these, then go ahead with yes. Something that I didn't mention on the individual survey that I'll mention now, just as a technique that you'll want to use. I always tell people when I'm doing the survey, that when we get to the yes or no section, I just start prompting them. I say yes or no, and then I'll read the question. And if they start giving me a whole bunch of details or a whole bunch of story, it's actually kind of not good for them. It's not trauma informed to kind of let them sort of stir up like all this past trauma. So just kind of repeat them like, oh, these are just yes or no questions, yes or no, and then I ask them a question again. And usually you do it 2 or 3 times and they get the idea like, okay, I'm just going to do yes or no. And I tell them like it's for your own protection. You don't need to get into all the details. This is your information, not ours. So I kind of use that technique as I'm going through here. There are going to be some extra questions at a point here. Sorry for the extra noise here, right next to the street. So just make sure that when you get to the extra questions, they're going to basically ask about their kids and different involvements of their kids. They're pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that you slow down and get the details right, as you're getting those answered. So pretty self-explanatory. Go ahead.
I know on the family one, so when they have like little babies and stuff, and there's a question that asks like, is everyone able to care for themselves and bathe and everything like that? When they have little babies, we are supposed to say no, right? Because their babies can't do that for themselves, even though they can do that for their kids.
Oh, no. The intent is that are you able to? Let's go over to the question real quick because the intent is like compared to a normal situation where somebody's able to get all of their needs met. Let me see here. Where is that? Is everyone in your family able to currently take care of basic needs like bathing, changing clothes, using a restroom, getting food and clean water, and other things like that? So you're comparing this to somebody that can meet all those needs. So like a baby in any circumstances, not going to be able to care for themselves. So I mean, that's not really the issue. The issue is that are they not able to meet their needs? Food, clothing, and all the specific things that it says here, compared to a normal situation. Are they going without? Are they not able to get this need met on a regular basis, like someone like you or I would be able to? So that's what you're competing against. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions about the family survey? In terms of just how we're administering it, or any other details that you've had when you go through it.
One more.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
when it talks about the planned activities, other than just surviving right now because of COVID. I get a lot more people that say no because of COVID. Is it okay if I be like, kind of specify, okay, if it wasn't for COVID, is that something you would normally do?
It doesn't matter. It's entirely up to their perception. So
Okay.
if their perception is that they don't have anything else that they look forward to, then we're going to go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in kind of it, as I understand it, it's intended to dial into their perception, because if they really don't have any hope, and they might be considering something more drastic, it's trying to get a sense of their state of mind. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. And again, absolutely make sure that you're using, because this is a new edition, you want to make sure that you're capturing the demographic information for every family member. We weren't doing that before. Definitely you are required to do that now. And we have to enter it in, or HUD will get on our case about that data. So, so make sure that you're putting all that information in. Okay, so that's the individual and family. Real quick, there is, I don't have an anonymous youth survey, and I don't know if Alex is still on, but we need to create a youth anonymous survey. Youth survey has some different kinds of questions. The only time that you're going to use this is if you have a young adult, 18 to 24. They have to be over 18, but when they were under 18, if they were experiencing literal homelessness, streets, shelter, vehicle at night, and it was, that had happened in their years under 18, then you can use the youth survey, because it is actually designed to be more capable of extracting those experiences that were relevant to homelessness out of that youth experience as well. So you can use the youth. For now, I think the best that we could do is you could use a youth survey. You just don't put them, which I included in your packet. You can just use that, and then we'll have to work something out with Anna to get it scored, or we can get it to us or scored or something like that. But we'll figure it out. So definitely use the youth survey if it's appropriate, because it is a good way of capturing somebody's experience that is 24 to 18 that was experiencing homelessness in a literal way when they were under 18. So again, only when they were under 18 and experiencing literal homelessness. Okay. So just about ready to wrap up. I'm going to go over a few next steps, but any questions on family, youth, or individual surveying? Okay, so we had a little bit of a delayed start here. We're definitely going to let you guys absorb what we talked about here and do a follow-up here in a couple weeks. The idea with the follow-up is that with the pre-screening tool, especially since it's brand new and I'm going to have to do some patches on it right away, you may have issues and questions about that. You may have issues and questions about the quality control checklist. So we definitely want you, these are going to be really important to use, because we're going to hold you accountable to them. If you're actually not using them, we're actually going to have this receipt process where we're going to send you a receipt back that will let you know, hey, we got your survey, and if there was issues with it, we'll let you know, and we'll keep track on the survey. If enough issues keep repeating, and we have kind of informed and try to support you in overcoming them, but if they continue, then eventually we could ask you to not survey anymore. We don't want that to happen to anybody. But we are kind of building some accountability just to make sure that people are getting a quality experience in coordinated entry, and that they're getting connected to housing right away. And if they're needed to be diverted to some other type of housing, we're going to work a little bit on that next time, so that you guys can be confident in how to do that. Take a look at the quality control checklist. There's a couple things on there. There's a link to an engagement toolkit on there. On that engagement toolkit, there's a housing screening tool that can screen for all housing types, all 55. So you can check into that. There's the durable contact information link. Make sure that when you're capturing contact information on these surveys, you should be getting 4 or 5 contacts and doing an excellent job of capturing contact information. Do a over-the-top job as compared to before. Make sure that, imagine that this information has to last 6 to 9 to 12 months. So do a great job on that. I think other than that, that's about all we wanted to cover in this particular session. But before we kind of conclude, any other questions that you guys wanted to cover? Okay, so I'm going to patch up the pre-screening tool. You guys can start using that immediately. Make sure Jessica will make sure that everybody gets access to that and you can use it. I think if you do have questions with it, you can email me. I'm gonna email to Jessica right after this a contact list for coordinated entry. In coordinated entry, I do permanent supportive housing for individuals. Jana does permanent supportive housing for families. And then Jana also works on rapid rehousing in Casa de Phoenix. So just so you know the kind of the division of labor here. And then AJ, he enters all your surveys and he may be providing feedback and he'll start working with the receipt system once we get that in place. And so I'm going to send that over to you guys as soon as we get done. And then remember, if you're submitting your surveys, they're going to go to either fax, the 888-527-6480, which this is kind of more information for Anna, or she can email them to us directly. She kind of knows all that stuff. But when you're communicating to your people how to check up on it, remember that there's the text number, which I'll make sure that it's on the quality controls checklist, but the text number 505-226-3848, that's one of the best ways to get a hold of us. And then the CAP email, which I'll send you in just a second here. All this contacts information is on the information that I'm sending you in a minute. The CAP@nmceh.org, that email is a good one for our people to be able to follow up with. So give them the text number, that let them know that if they call, we selectively answer the phone sometimes because we're having to house people. So it's fine to leave a voicemail. Make sure they're just clear about how exactly we can follow up with them if that's the only thing that they can do. Like time and place when we can follow up with them is really important. If they just leave a message with no follow-up information, that makes it really hard for us to know when and where to call them. So make sure that they're giving us that information if they leave a voicemail, or make sure that they text or email us. All right, so that's kind of the full cycle of everything. Anything else that you guys want to talk about in this particular session? You'll have plenty of time in the next one.
I think I asked all the questions. So with the pre-screening tool on our end, because it's an electronic thing, is there something could we like print it and then attach it like when we are doing the forms? Would that be helpful, or you guys will just know because of the answers on the assessments?
So we're going to know that you did it because remember, when you get done using the pre-screen tool, you should only be doing a survey for those 4 housing types: rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, shared permanent supportive housing, or transitional housing, which is only for recovery, which is Casa de Phoenix. So, so if you have gone through the pre-screen, then one of those 4 is green, then you're writing that at the top, remember. So we'll know then that, okay, they went through the pre-screen tool. And then with the quality control process, that's something that we'll see as we interact with people, and we'll know if you've kind of done all the due diligence of doing a quality survey. So just use them both for every survey. It's good to just at the end of your survey, just recap and make sure, oh, did I do all these quality control pieces? And just get in the habit. It's just really just changing the habits, a few habits that we have about the quality of the survey process.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we sign off? Okay. All right. I'm going to send over the contact information for coordinated entry, both for the people that we serve and for you all. And Jessica can send that out to you guys. Make sure that you all get the pre-screen tool from Jessica. Make sure that if you have any questions, you're contacting me about it. And we'll work that out, and then we'll connect again in another 2 to 3 weeks. we'll be able to see, kind of your surveys coming in. If we have any issues or concern about them, we'll talk to you about it. If you have issues or concerns about the process, you will be able to talk through that next time. Maybe we could even do some scenarios. We can talk about other housing types. Make sure that we really, have a clear idea of how to serve our people best and make sure that they're getting connected to some kind of housing, which is the focus now of coordinated entry.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me and look forward to talking next time.
Thank you. You too.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.